I still remember the very day my world shifted. It wasn't just any betrayal, it was the kind of callous message that sinks its claws into your stomach and refuses to let go. The text from Daniel, a man I had believed to be my life partner, arrived on an otherwise ordinary afternoon, lighting up my phone as I was in the middle of finalizing a partnership agreement for my company, Econ Bloom. My phone buzzed once, and the screen displayed a single line. I found someone new. You should move out by Friday. Don't contact me again unless it's about the divorce. So abrupt. So cold. It was a shock, yes, but not a total surprise. My chest tightened, but my mind? My mind was already prepared. It was one of those moments where time slows down in the strangest way. I could see my reflection in the glossy phone screen and almost recognized a flicker of satisfaction in my own eyes. Because as painful as it was, I had been expecting this. Daniel's behavior over the last few months had been riddled with suspicious late nights, withheld affections, and flimsy excuses. I wasn't clueless. I'd merely been biding my time. I glanced at the digital clock in the corner of my laptop screen. My final pitch meeting with a potential investor was in half an hour. There was no room for emotional meltdown, so I inhaled deeply, forced myself to ignore the trembling that threatened to rattle my composure, and typed back, "Understood. I wish you well. This will be handled soon." No accusations. No, "How could you?" No demands for explanation. The brevity of my reply must have shocked him. Maybe I was supposed to break down or call him repeatedly, trying to salvage what was left of a once blissful relationship. But I'd already reconciled with the truth months ago, and I'd set in motion a plan I hoped never to use. What else could a woman do when her entire family mocked her for not having a real job, and her husband sneered at her modest entrepreneurial endeavors, only to belittle them as cute side projects? You learn to build your own fortress, brick by painstaking brick. My family's disapproval stung long before Daniel's betrayal. The aunts, uncles, cousins, even my parents, had never liked that I chose to hustle as a freelance consultant and eventually launch an e-commerce analytics startup. I had a strong technical background, but to them, a real job meant a stable paycheck, a boss, and a retirement plan you could sum up in a neat, bullet-point list. Aunt Millicent would sniff disdainfully at Thanksgiving dinners, saying, "When are you going to settle down and find something stable? You know your sister's a nurse, and your cousin Chad is going to law school." My father would grin awkwardly and change the subject, either unwilling or unable to defend my choices. At first, I took their disapproval personally, letting it gnaw at my confidence. But a part of me understood that entrepreneurship often looks risky and lonely from the outside, especially if you fail once or twice, as I did in the early days. Econ Bloom had started in my cramped living room, overshadowed by my older projects that never found traction. I had a handful of clients, barely enough money to pay the bills, and a thirst for something more than just a stable career. Despite my family's constant negativity, I pressed on. Little by little, I attracted small businesses that needed help analyzing market trends, bridging the gap between their product lines and online audiences. Word spread in niche circles that I was good at what I did, meticulous, data-driven, and innovative. Soon, Econ Bloom had grown from a modest side gig to a fledgling startup. My husband, Daniel, had initially seemed supportive, but as the company required more and more of my time, he began to change. Maybe he had expected me to be more domestic, to revolve my life around him. Or maybe it was simpler than that. He saw no immediate financial glory in what I was building, and grew resentful when he realized it wouldn't yield overnight millions. His dismissive attitude shifted from occasional sardonic remarks. "So, how many Amazon packages did you analyze today?" to open hostility whenever I returned from my makeshift office. I sensed he was drifting. I spotted texts on his phone that made my heart freeze. I noticed new cologne, an added bounce in his step, and the sly habit of pivoting conversations away from me. Instead of confronting him, I quietly prepared. Emotional entanglements aside, I had to ensure that if everything came crashing down, Econ Bloom would remain safe. So, I gathered documents, changed passwords, revised contracts, and transferred equity. Most important, I held my cards close to my chest. No revelations, no arguments, no grand announcements. I simply made sure that if Daniel ever decided to jump ship, I wouldn't be left clinging to a door in the freezing ocean. In those months leading up to Daniel's abrupt message, I also restructured my finances. I hired a lawyer in secret, my ex-colleague from college who specialized in small business law. He'd always told me, entrepreneurs need to protect themselves. Marriage can be wonderful, but don't let your business get tangled up. So every time I inked a new client contract, I had it stowed away in a specialized trust that was solely under my name. Every spare penny I earned, I funneled into covert accounts that I kept separate from Daniel. Not to hide wrongdoing, but to shield myself from the exact scenario in which I now found myself. I also kept my lawyer updated on the tiniest details, that Daniel had once helped me buy office equipment with our joint funds and had threatened to claim partial ownership of Econ Bloom if it ever hit it big. He used to say it jokingly, but the implication was there. If I ever succeeded, he'd be ready to sweep in and take credit. hence my precautions were layered like a fortress. My emotional well-being needed protection too. It wasn't that my feelings for Daniel had evaporated, certainly not at first, but I recognized that the marriage was eroding. On the nights when he would return home, reeking of stale bar air and someone else's perfume, I swallowed the hurt. Instead, I threw myself into planning. Me, heartbroken? Perhaps. But me, unprepared? Never. So when Daniel's text slammed into my phone, my mind, heart, and ledger were all in agreement. This was the end, but not my end. My phone buzzed again, another message that read, "Don't make this messy. We both know you can't afford a nasty divorce." I almost laughed at the irony. He truly had no idea of the steps I'd taken. Daniel still thought E. Calm Bloom was a floundering pet project. He believed my savings were meager. He believed my entire sense of self-worth hinged upon his presence. The knowledge of how wrong he was gave me a private sense of triumph. Daniel wasted no time flaunting his new partner on social media. Within days, acquaintances told me they'd seen him posting pictures with someone named Erica. Wine tastings, nights at upscale restaurants. Conveniently, these were posted at times he'd once claimed to be working late. The gall of it. But I refused to engage. I had bigger pursuits to devote my energy to. Word got around, of course, through the grapevine of family chatter. My mother called, voice thick with worry. "Everly, sweetie, is everything all right? I heard Daniel is not living at home anymore?" She sounded half concerned, half accusatory, as though the meltdown of my marriage was simply the latest in a long line of misguided fiascos. In her mind, maybe if I'd had a standard 9 to 5, none of this would have happened. "I'm fine, Mom," I told her calmly. "I'm focusing on my work." A beat of stunned silence. Then the patronizing, "Well, you know best, dear." Daniel, for his part, seemed confident I would come crawling back, or at least break down. He texted me from time to time with thinly veiled jabs. "Can we finalize the mortgage details?" "I want to be sure you get your share of the debt." Or, "Let me know if you need help with your startup finances." The nerve. Every barbed comment revealed how little he knew me. He assumed I was lost without him, that I was drowning in a sea of worthless ambition. I kept my emotions locked down because at that very moment, Ecom Bloom was on the cusp of something extraordinary. A bigger competitor had approached me for a partnership that would expand my analytics platform into a multinational setting. Though I couldn't publicly disclose the negotiations yet, it was a deal that would catapult me from scrappy entrepreneur to the helm of a powerful SaaS solution for e-commerce sellers around the globe. The betrayal from Daniel might have lingered in my mind, overshadowing everything, if not for the frantic pace of the next few weeks. Within days of receiving that text, I found myself at a sleek, high-rise boardroom in the city. I was meeting with potential investors who saw the massive potential in the tool I'd built, a suite of analytics dashboards that simplified complex data for small to mid-sized online retailers. Everyone at the table understood that e-commerce was a booming field, and they were impressed by my thorough knowledge and unique approach. It wasn't easy, but I presented with confidence, ignoring the rattlesnake of anxiety coiled in my chest. Eventually, negotiations took shape, and I walked out with a deal that I could scarcely believe. The story soon hit the local business news. Ecom Bloom raises $10 million in Series A funding. My name was right there in black and white. Founder and CEO, Everly West. Almost overnight, the chatter among my extended family shifted from "she works from home in pajamas" to "she's a real business owner and she's loaded now." It was surreal. My phone buzzed with calls and texts. Not from Daniel this time, but from cousins, from uncles, from that high school friend I hadn't heard from in over a decade. They all wanted to congratulate me, to reconnect, to get my perspective on how they could do something similar. Suddenly I was the family star. My mother left voice messages full of warm pride. "Oh, honey, you did it. We always knew you would do something big." A blatant lie, but I could hear the trembling sincerity of her belated admiration. And then came the requests for money. They arrived like clockwork. "Hey, cuz, my small bakery is struggling. Could you invest $25,000? Or, "Everly, I'm behind on my rent. Could you spot me a loan for a few months?" People who had never given me the time of day now acted as if we were bosom buddies. I was polite but firm, telling them I was still funneling almost every dollar back into the business and had no investable funds for their personal ventures. A half-truth. I could afford it if I wanted to, but I had no intention of funding people who only respected me once I'd proven my financial worth. Once news of Ecom Bloom's success circulated, Daniel's stance shifted dramatically. Instead of the snide remarks, I got messages sweetened with nostalgia. "Remember how we used to talk about traveling the world once your business took off? And I'm so proud of you. You've always been a genius." Indeed, he even dropped hints of regret. But it was too little, too late. Little did he know that, behind the scenes, his impulsive behavior was causing him real harm. He'd walked out of our marriage with no plan beyond the assumption that he'd keep the house, the car, and half of everything else. But because I'd meticulously documented which funds had gone into Econ Bloom and which were solely mine, Daniel couldn't place a legitimate claim on my business. His lawyer's attempts to find holes in my contracts failed. My friend, who was now my official legal counsel, handed them a bulletproof dossier, effectively shutting down every demand or accusation they tried to fling at me. Daniel had also overestimated his finances. He'd been spending lavishly, presumably to impress the new partner, Erica. Luxury dining, flashy vacations, an upgraded car. Without access to my income or future successes, Daniel was increasingly strapped for cash. Soon enough, he missed a mortgage payment on the house, a property we'd purchased together, but for which he insisted I had no real share, ironically leaving himself on the hook for most of the liability. The bank notices began piling up. I should have felt pity, but mostly I felt a strange sense of vindication. The man who had so confidently declared me helpless was now flailing because of his own hubris. He tried to call me one day, presumably to show contrition or to coax me into helping with his sudden financial downturn. I sent him to voicemail. Word spread through the family rumor mill that Daniel was in hot water. His new partner had apparently left him for someone with deeper pockets, or so they said. Poor Daniel was the refrain from a few of my relatives who had once idolized him. A year prior, these same relatives couldn't help pointing out how amazing Daniel was. Stable job, good benefits, a man of structure. In their eyes, I was the unstable one with the shaky work-from-home dreams. Funny how quickly perspectives shift. And oh, how the hypocrisy rained down when certain members of my family suggested I should help Daniel. You two were married, after all. Surely you can give him a little something to help him get back on his feet? Their audacity would have been amusing if it weren't so insulting. Help the man who kicked me out via text message and flaunted his affair online? The same man who condescended to me at every turn, who threatened to take a share of my company if I ever tasted success, and who spent his nights with someone else while I built my dream in solitude. I told them politely that Daniel and I were in the middle of a legal separation, and I couldn't comment on any financial arrangement. It was my diplomatic way of saying, not happening. The next few months were a whirlwind for Econ Bloom. With the new funding, I hired a team of brilliant developers and data analysts. We moved into a modern co-working space, a far cry from my living room. Major retail companies began seeking partnerships. I found myself traveling to conferences and forging alliances I could only have dreamed of before. One morning, a major business publication ran an article titled, "The Rising Star of E-Commerce Analytics: How Founder Everly West is Changing the Game." My phone nearly exploded with congratulations, requests, and the inevitable "so proud of you" messages. My father, who once pretended not to hear me when I explained my business model, called and left a teary voicemail. "I always believed in you, Everly, even if I didn't say it enough. We're so proud." For a moment, I felt a slight pang of regret for the lost time we could have had if my family had been supportive from the start, but life marches forward, and sometimes success is the only language people understand. In the midst of that day's euphoria, I got a text from an unknown number. It turned out to be Erica, of all people, Daniel's ex-flame. She'd found my number through mutual acquaintances. She wrote, "I'm sorry about everything. I didn't realize what I was getting into with Daniel. He's a mess now. Just wanted you to know I regret the pain we caused you." I read it twice, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sympathy, just emptiness. Daniel and Erica were chapters of my life that had ended. Maybe in some parallel universe, we could have resolved things amicably, but in this one, I simply pressed delete and moved on with my day. As the divorce proceedings finalized, Daniel tried one last gambit. He attempted to claim that he'd contributed intellectual property to Econ Bloom. The claim was quickly quashed by the comprehensive records my lawyer had meticulously compiled. The judge's final ruling left him with no legal share in my company. Furthermore, because he had deserted me in such a callous way, and because I had quietly documented every instance of his financial irresponsibility, he couldn't claim spousal support either. In fact, the only thing we had to divide was the mortgage liability. Daniel begged me to buy him out of the house, but I refused. I had no wish to pay for a place saturated with memories of betrayal and heartbreak. If he wanted to keep it, the cost was his alone to bear. A few months later, I learned that the bank finally foreclosed on the property. He was forced to move into a small apartment far from the city's upscale neighborhoods. Word had it, he was trying to find a roommate to split rent. It was a spectacular fall from grace for a man who once thought himself indispensable and me incapable. My final direct contact with Daniel happened on a crisp fall evening when he unexpectedly showed up at my new office. The receptionist buzzed me, saying there was a distressed man in the lobby. I came down, more curious than anything else. There stood Daniel, looking worn and thinner, dark circles under his eyes. He mumbled, "Everly, I messed up. I lost everything. And I'm sorry. Is there any way we could just talk?" Behind him, a hallway of glass walls revealed my bustling team, men and women wearing name badges with the blossoming Econ Bloom logo, brainstorming on whiteboards, discussing cutting-edge updates to our analytics suite. The reflection of our busy operation shimmered in the glass panels. This was my territory now, my success. And Daniel appeared so small next to it all. For a moment, I thought of how I used to dream of hearing Daniel's remorse, of him realizing I wasn't just a naive dreamer. But now that the moment was actually here, I found no satisfaction in his misery. Instead, I felt a surge of empowerment. I simply told him, I accept your apology, but there's nothing left for us to discuss. I've moved on. Please don't come here again. He opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, but I turned and strode away, feeling the resonance of finality echo in my steps. I went back to my team, to the people who believed in me, and to the company that I had built from the ground up, despite everyone's doubts. Months passed. I found myself at a charity gala one evening, invited because Econ Bloom was sponsoring a program that supported young entrepreneurs, precisely the sort of program I wished had existed for me years ago. My new life partner, a kind and brilliant partner in every sense of the word, was at my side. The expansive ballroom glowed with chandeliers. Around us, accomplished men and women mingled, forging connections. Nobody doubted my legitimacy here. I was no longer the little dreamer. I was a recognized innovator. In one corner of the room, I spotted my parents, wide smiles plastered on their faces as they bragged to someone about my achievements. They caught my eye and waved me over, beaming with pride. Although their support had come late, I accepted it. People can change. And though they'd once been dismissive, they were trying to make amends. We'd found a kind of peace between us. That's when the keynote speaker began her introduction. Our next guest is a trailblazer in e-commerce analytics. She turned a small idea into a national phenomenon, defying countless naysayers along the way. I felt my cheeks flush warmly as the room turned toward me. Applause rippled across the crowd. I took the podium, glancing around at eager faces, so different from the mocking smirks I'd once endured. As I spoke about the importance of believing in your vision, I glimpsed a faint memory of Daniel in my mind, his scornful expression when I stayed up late at my laptop, debugging code or analyzing datasets. The old wound no longer hurt. It was just a scar that reminded me of how far I'd come. My voice never wavered. I talked about resilience, about ignoring the noise of those who belittle your ambitions, and about never letting anyone else define your worth. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. The rest of the evening flowed by in a haze of congratulatory handshakes, clinking glasses, and new business contacts. At one point, I caught sight of my phone. Another message from a distant cousin. Hey, congrats on your success. Could you help me with a down payment for my new car? I smirked and locked the screen. Some things never change. On the ride home, my partner reached for my hand and asked, Are you okay? You seemed a bit reflective up there. I turned to him, the city lights reflecting in the car window, and allowed myself a small, satisfied grin. I'm more than okay, I said. I'm exactly where I need to be. And in that quiet moment, I felt the deep reverberations of triumph. Not the petty kind that seeks to gloat over those who doubted me, but the liberating kind that comes from having secured my future on my terms. Betrayal had shattered my illusions, but not my spirit. The best revenge, I discovered, was not an act of vengeance at all, but the unshakable realization that I'd built a successful, fulfilling life from the ashes of heartbreak. They laughed at me for not having a real job, but I got the last laugh. And I didn't even need to raise my voice. My success did all the talking.